Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to be making a dubstep beat. This video is a continuation of the other video I uploaded called How to Create a Drum Beat inside of Ableton Live. This is going to be a bit more specific and we're going to be using some more additional features. So you should learn some more if you've already seen that video. So let's jump straight into it. I'm going to move through this as quickly as possible. So just slow down the video if I'm going too fast for you, or just rewind and replay. Here's what the drum pattern sounds like. Let's make it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to delete all of the additional channels. So I'm going to select the first one, hold shift, select the last one, press delete. I just need one MIDI channel. I'm going to change this to 140 BPM. So click, type in 140, enter. We're going to be using a drum rack. So I'm going to come to drums and click and drag a drum rack and drop it on that channel. So a drum rack is different to the drum kits that I used in the previous video. The drum kits come with sounds already preloaded into them. The drum rack is completely empty, and I'm going to be using a sample pack by Cymatics. They've made some dubstep sample packs. This one is called Mothership, and it's got some drum samples that I like the sound of. So the link will be in the video description if you want to get this sample pack and use the samples. They're pretty cool. So we're going to go to kicks, and I'm going to I know exactly which sounds I want, so I'm just going to grab them and pull them in. So if you want to hear the other samples, go over to the link and check them out. I'm going to grab that snare drum, and I'm going to grab two hi-hats. This one and this one. So you can see I've just put the 4 samples in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Kick, snare, hat 1, hat 2. Okay, simple. I'm going to just name this drums. So I'm going to go Control R to rename, and then just type in drums, press enter. So now I've got my samples loaded into my drum rack, but now I need a MIDI clip in order to sequence the drum. I want to make a drum pattern. So I just double click into that empty slots and it drops in a MIDI clip. Cool. So that's the orange clip. I'm just going to delete those additional ones. We just need one MIDI clip. And you can see that the MIDI clip is only 1 bar of music long. So this is the first beat, the second beat, the third beat, and the fourth beat. I want 4 bars of music. So I'm going to go down to the length here, and I'm going to change that from 1 bar to 4 bars. 4. Great. So now you can see there's 1 bar here, second bar, third bar, fourth bar, and all of them are broken down into 1 beat, 2 beat, 3 beat, 4 beat. Cool. So let's go ahead and arrange the kick and the snare. So a traditional dubstep pattern would have the kick on the first beat and the snare on the third beat, and it would just alternate back and forth just like so. So I'm just double clicking to place those snares. I know that this bottom one, if I press the headphone button, I can audition. I know that bottom piano key is the kick, and I know this one's the snare. So let's go ahead and play that by pressing, I can press the play button here. I can press the space bar on my keyboard. It doesn't know that I'm going to play it. So if I press it here, now I can re-trigger with the space bar. So kick, snare, kick, snare. Typical dubstep pattern. So we're going to spice it up. We're going to miss this first kick, and we're going to play on the second beat. And this is going to leave us in anticipation of that kick happening. It doesn't happen. Then it happens on the second beat, and then it quickly goes into the snare. So let's listen to how that sounds. Kick, snare. So it's kind of like a sort of backwards rhythmic feeling. And then we're going to have the kick and snare exactly the same on the second one. So, third bar. So the first bar and the third bar are going to be the same pattern. The second and the fourth are going to be variation patterns. So kick, snare, kick, snare, kick, snare, kick, 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 snare, I think is what we're going to do. Or kick, or just a real quick kick, snare. So maybe I'll place it here and we'll listen to it, see how it feels. Kick. Cool. That works really nicely. Sweet, perfect. That is our kick and snare pattern that we're going to use. Next, what we're going to do is I'm going to show you a feature. So originally I put all of these samples in the same drum rack, but actually I want to arrange the hi-hats in a bit of a different way. So what I'm going to do is, instead of making the pattern in here, I'm actually going to click the first hat, this one. I'm going to click it and I'm going to drag it and I'm going to pull it out into this gray area here, and I'm going to drop. And what that does is it actually splits that sample off into its own drum rack. And if I just go Control Z to go back, and I come back into the clip, what I could do is I could draw in a whole bunch of hi-hats, right? Go back to the drum rack, click the sample, drag, pull out. And then if I look inside of this clip, you'll see that it's also pulled across the hits. So if I want to, say, take the snare and put it on its own channel, this is the snare. I can click, drag, drop, and look inside the clip. There's my snare. So I can call this snare. So I could make a pattern altogether, but then if I want to split it out and process it separately, I could just click and drag. That's a really cool feature. So we'll keep the snare separate for now. We've got this hat here, we'll call it hat 1. And if I come into the drum rack, I'm going to grab that fourth hit, the second hat. I'm going to pull it out, drop it, and I'll rename that hat 2. Okay, so now everything's actually on its own channel, and I just wanted to use it all on the one just so I could show you that feature. So we've got the kick and snare. Let's make the hi-hat pattern. Now, I'm going to show you another feature which is really cool. I can just color these different colors so I can tell them apart from one another. And then I can right click and assign the track color so that the clip is the same color. So the drum, or the kick rather, is orange, the snare is green, the hat is blue. And then if I click on the kick, hold shift and click the clip, that selects all of the clips. And you'll see here that up on the top part of this bar, if I put it here, I've got an orange. If I put it here, I've got a green. And if I put it here, I've got a blue, okay? So what that's indicating is when I've got the orange one selected, I can edit the MIDI for the kick drum. Sweet. When I have the green one selected, I can edit the MIDI for the snare. And when I've got the blue one selected, I can edit the MIDI for the hat. So this lets me change 3 MIDI clips or more at one time. So I just need to select whichever one it is that I want to change, and then it becomes available to me. So I can click on the blue one. I want to edit the hi-hats. I'm going to right click on the grid and I'm going to change it to 8th notes because I want to make these hi-hats 8 notes pattern. So I'm going to double click, double click, double click, double click. I'm going to click that one and just go Control D, and I just want the hi-hat to be rolled out across the entire pattern, but I want to keep this area free. Okay, so let's listen to all of that together. Great, okay, so that sounds very robotic and rigid, and we're gonna do something to fix that. But for right now, we are happy with how that sounds. And finally, I'm going to make one more clip. I'm going to make sure that I put it at a length of 4. And what I'm going to do with this hi-hat is that snare sits on the 3rd beat of the first bar. I'm going to just create a small little roll, a 30-second note roll, where I put 1, 2, 3, 4 hi-hats right before that 3rd beat. And that's going to sound like this. Cool, now that's sort of like a trap sounding trick, and I just want to do it just to add a little bit of flair to this pattern. So we've got all of this working. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to quickly deactivate my webcam so that you can see the next part of this tutorial where I'm going to talk about the groove. So give me one moment, I'll be right back. Okay, so I've disappeared now, and you can see that there's this little window here where my webcam usually sits. And you can see that there's this little icon that looks like a wave. That is the groove pool icon. And if I click that, it drops it away. Click it, it opens it up. So what is a groove? A groove is a template inside of Ableton that adds swing and groove to a audio clip or a MIDI clip. So it changes its timing. So when we have a digital sequencer such as this, the piano roll inside of Ableton, everything is rigidly stuck in time. But when a human plays a drum kit, not everything is hit at the same velocity and at the exact same time that it should hit. So essentially what we're doing with the groove pool is we're humanizing our beats. Okay, so what we can do is we can right click here and we can say browse the groove library, and it brings up this window, and inside the swing and groove it shows us all of these different patterns. So hip hop, Latin percussion, it's got stuff from Logic, it's got stuff from the MPC units, it's got all sorts of other things, and then it's got swing. What we're going to do is we're going to open up the MPC and we're just going to scroll down and we're going to select this one here. This is, if we click and drag it into the groove pool, we've loaded that in, and it's called this MPC 16 double down -55. Okay. And now we can apply this to our MIDI clips. So I'm going to apply it to the kick, the snare, and the hat, but I'm not going to put it on the second hat. Click, drag, click, drag and drop, click, drag and drop. Okay. And what I should have done before I did all of that is I should just turn the velocity up just a little bit. So I want the velocity to be sort of quite dramatically affected by this groove pool. The timing's fine, the quantization's fine. Okay, let's say that that's perfect, and I don't know whether I need to drop it on there again just to refresh it so that it knows that I've changed the velocity. But now what we can do is in each individual clip, we can click commit. And what that does is it applies that groove to that particular clip. And you can see now we look at the velocity, that's 99. This one's 90. This one's 99. This one's 96. And this one's 75. So it's changed the velocity. And if we zoom in, we can also see it's actually changed and moved where those kicks hit on the grid. Now they're slightly off time. So if I go into the snare and I commit to that as well, and I come into the hi-hats and I commit to the hi-hats, you can see it quite dramatically with the hi-hats. You can see that the velocity of them is modulated and the timing of them is off the grid. Okay, so let's have a listen to how all of that sounds now with that applied. So you'll notice that the hi-hat pattern in particular is more groovy. It's got more movement to it. It's not just the same tick, 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 tick over again. So we've started to humanize our beat. I'm going to turn my webcam back on and let's move on with the rest of the tutorial. So we've humanized our beat and we've added this little roll. We're going to come into the second hat and we're going to just slightly change the velocity of this one manually. So we're going to listen to that, see how it sounds all together. Cool, sounds a bit more natural like that. Great, that's perfect. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take this from the session view, we're going to put it in the arrangement view, and I'm going to show you a really quick and easy way to do that. So let's pause everything that we're doing, stop, and we'll go ahead and click the kick. I'll hold shift and I'll click the hi-hat. I'm going to click and now I can drag them around. So if I press shift, now I can drop it into the arrangement view and all those clips just drop in there in order. And if I deactivate this, it lets me edit the timeline here again, and I can actually zoom in on all of these. And if I press Z on the keyboard, it just makes it full screen. So let's go ahead and play. And I'm going to go Control L to loop that around. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to turn all of this into audio. So right now it's MIDI and it's playing MIDI sample, like the samples are audio, but they're getting triggered by MIDI. I can actually just turn this all into solid audio. So I can click, hold shift and click the bottom one to select them all, right click, and I can freeze the tracks, which essentially takes a snapshot of the MIDI and sort of semi turns it into audio so that the computer's not processing so much when it plays through. But when you do that, you can't go in and make edits. Everything's frozen. I couldn't drop effects on here. I couldn't do anything. So when you freeze something, you're kind of saying, just stay there like you are, but you're not technically MIDI anymore and you're not technically audio, but you're saving me on processing power so the computer's not working so hard to play that back. So it's frozen. I can actually flatten it now to turn it into audio. So we right click and we go flatten. And now it's all audio. Cool. So we can play that. Sounds exactly the same. So now we're going to add some final pieces of flair to all of this. So we're going to click the kick, we're going to hold shift, we're going to click the hat. We're going to right click and we're going to group it all. We're going to right click, rename this by going Control R. We'll call this drums. Cool. So we're going to process the drums all together, and then we're going to process certain elements of the drums. So we will just delete all of this. We will go into audio effects. We're going to find we're going to do a few things. We're going to put a reverb on the snare, the hat, and the hat. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a cool little reverse technique with the snare. So I'm going to grab the reverb, I'm going to drop it on the snare, and I'm going to change the wet dry to 33 or around 30. I'm going to bring up the decay time a little bit. I'm going to pull the pre-delay down. We'll put it on high quality just for the sake of it. And then we're going to click the snare channel. We're going to go Control D to duplicate it. We're going to right click. We're going to freeze. We're going to right click. We're going to flatten. So we've just saved that reverb sound onto that audio sample. So now if we just solo that, it's a reverb with a bit of, it's a snare with a bit of reverb on it. We can zoom in and we're going to cut this up. All right. So I'm going to use Control E on my keyboard to slice it right there. And then I'm going to use Control E on my keyboard again to slice it there. So now I've isolated this snare with reverb, but it's not the beginning transient. It's like halfway through. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it over here. I'm going to place it like so that it fills up that exactly that 2 beat period. I'm going to press Control J to consolidate it, to turn it into an audio file that just contains that. And then I'm going to press R on my keyboard to reverse it. And then we're going to listen to that with the snare. Cool. All right. So now we've got a cool audio reversing effect. We could try fading off the end, see how that sounds. Sweet. All right. I think that's sounding pretty cool. We can delete the reverb that's on the snare. We'll apply a different one in a minute. Cool. And we'll put a volume fade on that as well. So we'll fade it in and then we'll fade it out. So perfect. All right. So we'll grab that and we'll call that, we'll rename it FX snare, and maybe we'll pull the FX snare out of the group. Let's say it's part of a different group. And in the drums, we're going to put on a drum bus. Okay, so we're going to use this to add a little bit of spice to our drum kit. And we can come into the presets and we can have a look at the presets, and we're going to use punchy driven. So we'll drop that on there and we'll have a listen. That really kind of makes that drum in particular very like aggressive sounding. So we'll put this on, say, around 33%. So there's a good ratio of dry to wet. Perfect. And then finally what we'll do with the group is we'll put a glue compressor on there, and we're going to EQ so that we're not affecting the low end of that kick drum. We're going to add about 30 milliseconds of attack so that we're not crushing the transients on all of the particular sounds. And then we can bring the threshold down so that we're going to get around, let's say, between, 3 decibels of gain reduction, okay? When the snare's hitting, it's around 5, but that's okay. And we'll just make up the gain so we're not losing volume. And this is going to kind of just hold everything together. It sort of glues things together, glue compressor. Now what we'll do is we'll right click, we'll go insert return track, we'll click on the return track, we're going to go Control R, we're going to call this reverb. So we're going to put a bit of room verb on the sounds of the snare, the hi-hats, and that reverse, maybe not the reverse hat, we'll see. So reverb, we can open that up. We can go into the room presets and we can find drum room. We'll click, drag, drop, and then we can send some of the hi-hats there. So let's say around -15 of the hats. We'll listen to that. So that's with the hi-hat on. I turn it off. So it's quite dry. So maybe that's a bit much. We'll go, let's say -20. Turn the reverb off. Cool, that's nice. So let's go -20 on the snare as well. And we'll play them together. Cool, so that's adding a nice little sort of liveliness to those sounds. Let's listen to it all together. Perfect. All right, maybe that's still a bit too much reverb. We'll bring that down to maybe -25. Cool, that works nicely. A little bit more reverb on the snare than what's on the hats. Perfect. Okay, that's sounding really nice. And the last thing that I want to do is maybe I'll set up another return channel and I'll call this delay. And we'll come into Ableton. We'll find maybe a simple delay. And we could use a 16th note delay. We can drop that on there. And maybe we'll just send a little bit of a hat to it. So let's listen and say -20. Maybe that's too much. -25. Just adds a, maybe we'll go -30. Just adds a little bit of extra spice to it. Let's listen to it all together. Cool. That is our dubstep drum pattern. And if we want to hear what it sounds like with a bit of bass to it, we can quickly come in here back into the cymatics pack. And I can open up these loops, and these loops are at 150 BPM. So just so I'm not warping them, I'm just going to speed this up to 150. It'll still sound fine. And if I just change this so that it repitches it. It's just the most natural way of speeding things up. I just don't want any artifacts and stuff. And then we can find... Let's just chuck that in there. So let's see what this sounds like. And we'll bring it down a bit because it's quite loud. Cool. So in order to make that work even better, we would sidechain the kick to that. So let's just do it real quickly, just because I can teach you as much as possible in this quick little video. So let's go compressor. We drop the compressor on the bass. Let's rename this channel so it's called bass. We'll open up the triangle. We click sidechain. So what we want to do is when the kick plays, we want the bass to move out of the way. And we're going to do that by pushing the volume of the bass down and then letting it spring back out. Okay. So we select the audio from the kick. And we set the ratio, let's say, we'll turn that up a bit, we bring the attack down, we set the release a bit higher. So we listen to just the bass, and we can bring the threshold down. So notice now, the beginning of that bass is lower volume, and it's ducking down or pumping out of the way whenever the kick plays. So let's have a listen to all of that together now and see how it sounds. That is how you make a dubstep beat. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.